All right. So I believe I apologize. We're about 2 minutes tardy. Next time I'll bring a note. Michael Bryant here. This is Justice Served. And oh, wait a second. Linda Kenny Bodden. I understand that you had some kind of some stuff done, but that is amazing work that you had there, and it's unbelievable.
It's one
Justice,
person.
justice, where are you?
All right. Clearly not Linda Kenny Bodden, but Serena Townsend, who we are happy to have with us. I don't know who the we is. It's just me. I'm talking in third person. So good to have you along. You were with us a couple weeks ago. We appreciated the help. And Linda, well, she's on assignment. Um, you're going to help us out here with some questions and or answers, and I appreciate it. Where are you today? You're obviously
Oh
not
my
in your office
goodness.
that looks like the inside of a car.
I am actually in downtown Manhattan on 9/11, which was probably not the best idea of all time. But yes, I am now in a car, so things can be a little quieter than they are outside. And it's good to be here, coming live from New York.
Okay, and obviously we realize it is 9/11 today. 23 years it's been. Nearly 3,000 people lost. Today, the day it's commemorated generally by the reading of the names of all of those folks who lost their lives that day, and generally by the victims' family members. Interesting thing I just noticed about the process by which they've been trying to identify the victims. 23 years later, there are still more than 1,100 victims technically unidentified. There's no reason to think they're still alive somewhere, but they have a room full of, very small pieces of remains, like a fingernail tip. And even the DNA that we have now is not so sophisticated to allow it to identify those remains. 11, that's like 40% of those that died that day in the Twin Towers. And here we are 23 years later. So God bless all those who've lost loved ones and who are struggling. This day we know is special, and it will never be forgotten. So I appreciate your efforts on a tough day to get around down there. But obviously our issues are, a molehill compared to what others are dealing with today. So
For
with that in
sure.
mind, with that sobering thought, should we jump into a couple of things here?
We
I'm just
should.
gonna look at stuff kind of out of order in terms of how events have unfolded over the last week, because I want to talk about some fresh stuff here. The Appalachia High School shooting. We know that took place. It was a week ago today, as a matter of
Yep.
fact. Four folks lost their lives. Two students, both 14. Two teachers. And now the interesting latest wrinkle, which is not too surprising in light of the Ethan Crumley parents' case, but now the father, so far just the father, has been charged with involuntary manslaughter and, interestingly, second-degree murder, which I want to get your take on, Serena,
Yeah.
because that's clearly a very different crime, different culpability, different mindset, different mens rea. Let me read. Let me read one of our questions, and then we can kind of spin off of that and
Great.
talk about that, because I think that is a critical issue that's going to come up in any trial. Not just because it affects the number of years the defendant might do, but also just the burden of proof is going to be so different. Okay, and here, as usual, I'm totally disorganized with my notes. Okay, this is interesting. This comes from Psych 10011. Um, the mother of the mass shooter suspect called Appalachia High School with a warning. I wonder what, if anything, was the school able to do following the mom's call regarding an extreme emergency related to her son. They didn't have much time to act, as the shooter's mom got off the phone with the school about 10 a.m. and the police arrived at the scene of it about 10:20. So, generally, what I understand, tell me if you have heard otherwise. Um, the mother makes the call. They go looking for the youngster, Colt um, Gray, and they find a different kid. I don't know if Colt Gray is a very common name there in this little school. The school's about 45 miles northeast of Atlanta. But anyway, in the time that it takes them to find the wrong person and realize they have the wrong person, the shooting basically is underway.
Yep. You know, it's very frustrating because you could imagine that had they picked the right person and found the right person in time, literal lives would have been saved. And that's to me, it's a little crazy because how do administrators in a school. I mean, I don't know exactly how large that school is, but how do you not know what kid is who? How do you make that kind of mistake? It's not like somebody called and said, "Hey, my kid forgot their lunch today. Can you please pull him out of the class and bring him down so I could drop off lunch?" This is a life and death kind of phone call, and we're seeing the difference between someone's life and death because of kind of an administrative error that is so easily fixable. It's just really scary how it seems to be how lackadaisical they were in light of this emergency. And that plus the fact, I think you'll probably raise this, there had already been red flags with this kid, right? There had already been reports about him being potentially dangerous, having access to the firearm. And how on earth do you make this deadly error? How?
Yeah, and that gets us into this question, which is kind of a nebulous question, but it's a great one to set up this Crumley versus um, um, Gray analysis on
Mm-hmm.
Gray's Anatomy. This is from Communication Rich 522. Why would any parent buy a teen a gun? You were just looking for trouble. Okay, so let's talk about. It's almost a rhetorical question, but
Sure.
let's talk about the sequence of events here. We believe that it was roughly 3 months before the incident that Dad bought Junior a gun, this
Mm-hmm.
AR style rifle. But we also know now that the police were on the porch of this family talking to Dad and son a year earlier about
Yep.
some reports that had been made, something unsettling that the cops felt they needed to investigate. So now we're talking notice by Dad and him acting without regard to that notice to actually give his son, who may have been troubled and may have manifested that at the time, a gun that ultimately leads to this mass school shooting. How do you think that's going to impact the second degree murder case?
Michael, I actually am super interested in what you think about this, but my thoughts are, uh, you know, a jury is going to want to convict the dad, right?
Of
Like,
course.
you show up to court and you give them these facts, and you have the horrible lives that were lost and the families crying in the stands, and anybody who's going to be brought to trial having any sort of involvement in this case or knowledge beforehand is going to be tried, and a jury is going to want to see some sort of conviction there. That being said, if we look at things legally and we really look at the definition of, you say, murder versus manslaughter, like you said, the mens rea is totally different. Do we really think that because the son had intentions to kill people that the dad did too? Can we really put murder on him? Or is this just an unbelievably reckless or negligent thing that the father did in not only purchasing the gun, but also not putting in the right protocols to protect people from his own son, knowing that his son could be dangerous, is dangerous? All of that timeline that you're bringing up is relevant to what the dad was thinking and whether it was or was not kind of reckless or negligent for him to not take more action. But Michael, what do you think is going to happen? You think the charge is going to even stick, procedurally?
It's a good question. I think it's an emotional and natural reaction to what happened. The authorities are not shy about charging with maybe a little public pressure on them. But will they be able to prove a second degree charge based on your excellent discussion? I would say no. I just don't think it's there.
Yeah.
But, and in light of the Crumley case, and of course the Crumley case involving Jennifer and James Crumley, both convicted of involuntary manslaughter after their son Ethan pulled off his school shooting in the Michigan suburb there of Oakland County. It's a whole new ballgame, and we talked about it at the time they were convicted. It's like, where's the line? This falls so in line with what happened for the Crumleys, we don't have to extrapolate very much. It's not like we have to make this analogy with somebody who loans their kid a car and knows the kid
Yep.
speeds or has drunk driving charges. No, this is so much in line with what happened with Crumley, maybe even more so because of that 1 year period within which they presumably got some notice that son had an issue, that he had
Yep.
allegedly warned he was going to shoot up a middle school. Then he graduates from middle school. He's now in high school, and then he warns and then shoots up the
Mhm.
high school. I think, just on that fact pattern alone, not counting the sympathies, which we know are going to be huge, um, these parents are in trouble. And I say parents because mom so far has, avoided any connection. And maybe what
Yeah.
she did that morning is helpful, but I think we need to find out more about what she knew, what led her to make that call. That is so
Hmm.
much like the parent teacher conference scenario from the Crumley case.
That's
It was a
right.
10-minute phone call. It was a 10-minute parent teacher conference. Maybe more egregious because the parents are right there. They could have grabbed the kid and hauled him out in terms of the
Mhm.
Crumley case. But still, the analogy is not, it's not a reach.
It's not. And we all know that judges and lawyers love precedent. And when you have a good case and you have precedent for it, as a prosecutor, they're going to use that, whether it's in the same jurisdiction or not, it's still so well known, just kind of like everybody's using the Harvey Weinstein case to try to make sure that other accusers don't come out in court on cases that aren't necessarily in New York. You can, kind of explain to a judge, look, this is the way the tide is turning in the judicial world. We do have to have liability here for parents when certain things are known to them and they don't take appropriate actions to prevent this kind of attack. I do worry about where that line is. You mentioned the line. I do think in general it's very it is a nerve-wracking thing to be judged on someone else's actions. You always have like accomplice liability, right? Like an acting in concert charge when you're the getaway driver and you're not the one who shot the gun in the robbery where four people were involved. And yes, you have liability there. That's a little bit closer, and I could understand that. But how far on that spectrum are we going to, have parents get convicted for the crimes of their children? I do see it, but I do think judges need to be careful about how far we go.
Yeah,
What do you
and
think,
this,
Michael?
yeah, I think this is not a test case in any way for the reasons I mentioned. It's just too
Yeah,
similar. But there will be test cases that come along, and I think the car analogy I gave is probably the most likely, extrapolation. That's where it's going to go next because it is
sure.
an inherently dangerous item, just like a gun. And if you know somebody is irresponsible in the use of that item,
Hmm.
loaning them that item might be a bad thing. So we'll see. We'll see how this goes. And obviously, we're very early in the process. It was a week ago. We'll see how this develops, of course. So we will be on it throughout. So
Sure.
let's move on now. We're going to set the Wayback Machine here, Mr. Peabody, to Kohlberger, because I don't know. This is more procedural, pontificating than the facts are the facts, and I think everybody has wallowed in those, sad
Hmm.
and tragic as they are for a long period of time. So let's talk about the defense motion to change venue, which was granted by the Judge John C. Judge. If your name is Judge, aren't you going to be a judge?
Born to
I've
be a
got
judge, right?
I got a friend of mine. His last name is Hart, Hart. He's a cardiologist. I
Oh,
mean, it's
for
just
God's sake.
yeah.
I
People
love
think
it.
my last name should be Jerk
No.
because anyway. So okay, so we get the motion is granted. So Layton County says bye bye.
Yeah.
And now we don't know really where it goes. The odds-on bet is Ada, which is Boise, which is where Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell had their trials. Biggest population center in the state of Idaho. You go from 40,000 in Latah County to I think 6 times that in Ada, if that's where it goes.
Yeah.
So let me give you the question. Do you think, based on what the judge cited in his decision, and it was a long, one of these long decisions, that you know where he's going, how he's getting there, he's kind of giving you the reasoning so that maybe somebody is less upset about it. Oh, yeah, good idea there. Do you think the judge is asking to be released from the case? Now, this was from, let me see, let me read this here. Let me see. This is from Afton Fored 3685. Um, so let me ask you, and then I'll chime in. What do you think? Does the
Yeah,
judge
I
want
am
out of this
curious.
mess?
It is interesting because wouldn't that be a great way to get rid of a case without having to recuse yourself, right? It's like, if I don't want it, and somebody's giving me an out, then let me take it. But like you said, the judge did give lengthy reasoning as to why the case might be inappropriately heard in the current county. And you want to look, these kinds of cases, they can be appealed. Well, all cases can be appealed, obviously, but the ones that are so in the media and have so much attention on them, and there's always, a lot of issues that come up in a murder trial. Any reason whatsoever that a case can be successfully appealed has to be taken very seriously by a judge, and they need to be able to look at the possibilities and just see, well, what if I do grant this motion? Will I avoid prejudice? Will I avoid any sort of potential appeal down the road? And am I just being, am I being fair, or am I being overly cautious? These kinds of things are what a judge needs to think about. It would be nice, though, in addition, of course, if the judge didn't want the case, to be able to rely on this change of venue to do that. So it's a bit of a speculation at this point, but I like the question because he might have just killed two birds with one stone on that one. What do you think?
I like your answer because it's the proper answer and it's well reasoned. And here's my answer: they don't want this damn case. If you just look at, and I think if you look at the personnel involved, they say they're going to have pools of like 600 potential jurors at a whack. Okay, that's the geniuses have figured out that's how to go. They got one clerk there in Latah County. They don't have the money to bring in people. This person's got, I don't know, a few other cases to deal with. They just don't have the infrastructure to do it, let alone the pain in the ass that the media is. I mean, the circus environment there is going to be insane. I do believe it's better not to put that on the local folks there, because I think they've suffered enough through the course of this, and that would make it even more, not just a reminder of what happened, but just from a practical logistics standpoint, getting around town, and it would just be too much. So I have no problem with it happening. I'm not sure anybody's being honest about the reason at this point. So let's talk about what's likely to happen. I called the Supreme Court clerk there, because it goes to the administrator.
Nice.
And I said, "What's the deal?"
You're doing all the legwork. I love it.
And they basically said, we haven't decided yet, because the real question I was trying to get an answer to Afton Farrar 3685 question. And, basically, is Judge going to stay on it? Because we've seen that before. If they move venues and it's not too big a hassle for the judge, sometimes his staff as well, if it's a big enough operation, they can move, boom, everybody. I don't see that happening here, but I was curious. And because they don't have that many judges in Latah. If Judge goes away, it's probably 1/3 of the judges. So they said, no, we don't know what judge is going to get it. We don't even know what county it's going to be in. So they're playing it pretty close to the vest. So I said, well, any timeline for a decision? Remember, the trial's in June. Now, it's not like the players that need more time to prep. And in theory, the judge is always juggling a ton of stuff. It's not like you have to get the judge in on day one, but sooner is better, right? Sooner is better than later.
Absolutely. And if a lot of these, there's going to have to be pretrial motions that are decided by the actual trial judge. So yes, the sooner the better, because it's not like you and I both know, you don't just show up to court, on day one and, oh, hey, we are in the new venue. Let's pick a jury. There's a ton of stuff that needs to be decided pretrial.
And I could see, if they don't make a decision soon enough, I could see Kohlberger's attorney, Ann Taylor, the attorney, not the designer, I could see her. She has another reason to say, let's continue this. Let's push this out, because now we got other issues we have to deal with that we just learned about 2 months ago, 3 months ago. We're 9 months out right now, so it should happen. But officially, they have no timetable for making that decision. So, okay, let's see what else What's that?
Only time will tell.
Only time will tell. Those are good words. Oh, here's Sarah Boone. I like the Sarah Boone case. Oh my gosh, it's got so much.
Are you lining up to be her attorney?
Well, it's funny you should mention that.
I'm just wondering who's next.
I was out walking the dog the other day, and I saw this. I was going to say I was out jogging the other day, but who believe that? So I'm out walking the dog, and this is on a telephone pole. So I just grabbed it, looked it over. Oh, hey, looking for a prosperous challenge? Ready for your close-up on national TV? Are you zealous? Are you zealous with the side of keen? That's curious. Show the world who you are. I can't read the rest because it's a lot. Epic opportunity awaits, Sarah Boone. And there's her phone number if you want to give her a buzz, see what's happening.
That is incredible. I love it.
Actually, that's not her phone number. That's her inmate number. My mistake. That's her inmate number.
You can send fan mail.
Yeah, obviously, we're talking about Sarah Boone, which is, it's a scary case. That's the word that comes to mind for me, scary. This is a case in Florida, of course, aren't they all? And this has to do with, of course, she zipped her boyfriend into his suitcase because they're playing hide and seek. It's kind of a cool thing. kind of fun.
Michael, can I ask you a question?
I've never
How
been
is
zipped in a suitcase. No. Oh, that's not the question.
shoot? Okay, I'll ask you a different question.
Again.
Uh, how are you playing hide and seek if you're hiding the person who's supposed to be hiding from you?
Yeah.
The cat's out of the bag. I mean,
Yeah, that is definitely, if you're playing for money, that's a bad strategy.
yeah.
Uh, Bad
You go
strategy.
hide, and
So
I'll know where you are. Go ahead.
yeah, and I'll videotape me watching you. So just for those who may not be up to speed on this case, she zips this I guess boyfriend into the suitcase. She says she's clearly been drinking. You can tell from her speech, and I think that's been admitted. And then she forgets, and she goes to bed, and the next day he's not living. So she's been charged in that case with second degree murder. And again, that's more crime of passion, as we know, second degree
Yeah.
murder quite often. I find this interesting because there were so many opportunities for the passion to. When did the passion arise? That helps negate the first degree murder charge. But we'll
Right.
see. We'll see how this
No,
plays
that's a
out.
good
Anyway,
question.
so she's had, I think, 8 attorneys at this point.
I think you're
Um,
right.
and the judge ultimately said, "Look, this is not a never-ending process here." And the judge is Wayne Wooten. He said, "Enough already. You're on your own. You're going on your own." Well,
Yep.
that's what led to this from inmate number 2000563 in the Orange County Corrections Department, and
It's
she gets a
creative.
hit. She gets a hit.
Mm-hmm.
So now she has a new attorney. His name is James Owens. Been in the biz for a while. I think he was actually the elected public defender in his county for a short period of time,
Mm-hmm.
and now he's in private practice. And
Who
so
better?
I don't know. What's your feedback? Just your gut reaction on an attorney that responds to this?
Maybe they are keen, right? What were the
Oh, keen.
adjectives?
That is
Keen,
an
ready to
interesting
make their
skill
mark
set.
on the
Zealous
world.
with a side of keen.
A side of keen. Who
And I
doesn't
saw him
have a side?
interviewed. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
He doesn't have the Serena Townsend dynamic that I can, that's going to help me in the courtroom. Sorry, he seemed kind of
He's a little
flatline.
bit of the my cousin Vinny sidekick over there. Yeah. Um, the person who responds to that might actually be the person who relates best to her and might be the best person for the job in the weirdest way. Every pot has its lid, right? So she put out the ad, he answered it. It sounds like this might be a match made in heaven. And I don't know if that means she's going to get the best defense, but she might get the best person for her. But I'm dying to hear what you think because I feel like maybe had you seen that before him, you could have been the next one,
It's
right?
all about timing. It's all about timing. Yeah, I could have appeared pro hac vice in Florida. See, I dropped
Right.
a little Latin there. See that?
Killed it.
And this would be something. I don't know if it'll make or break a career, but
Yeah.
I also don't know if it's going to last. I don't know if she is smart enough to realize this probably is her last gasp. Because
Yeah.
although there was yet another request for continuance that wasn't granted, it ain't
Mm-hmm.
happening. At least in theory, the judge has suggested it ain't happening. You know how
Yeah.
these things are. Sometimes things change along the way. I think it's good she's got representation. I think that's the most important thing. How do you think it's
Yeah.
going to affect though her ability to, if she's pro se, she gets all the discovery, she gets special
Mm-hmm.
time in the jail, she gets maybe a computer. So now that stuff's probably stripped away, right?
Sure, yeah. And she's going to have probably an issue with that. She just seems like a very hands-on type of person who wants to control everything possible. I mean, look, it's not like her issues with the previous lawyers were, small in her mind or she was being polite about it. Hey, we're just not getting along. I mean, she's had some really, really not nice things to say about basically everyone. And I'm sure every single one of those lawyers really did try their best. So I do think that her not having that control anymore or having less control with somebody representing her might just be difficult for her to wrap her hands around, or head
Yeah.
around. But
Yeah,
I
or
don't know. I
suitcase
wish
around.
that guy luck. I really do.
Yeah. So, and I should mention she is claiming battered spouse syndrome or battered significant other syndrome, and
Mhm.
so obviously we know in Florida that's you got to prove it. So
Yeah.
we'll see how it unfolds in the Sarah Boone case. Okay, we got a little bit of time. Let's go back in time even further. Let's go back to, because nobody wants to distance themselves too much from the Karen Reed slash now Sandra Birchmore case.
Yeah.
So on the Birchmore case, um, let's talk about. I've got a question here from somebody. When they say devil's advocate, I'm immediately cued into what they might be asking. So this
Hmm.
is from Joe Jens, Jojenns. Devil's advocate. Let's assume the state police were too incompetent to solve this. Remember, this is an FBI indictment and
Yep.
arrest of. I guess I should give the basic details here. Obviously, Matthew Farwell has been arrested for the murder of Sandra Birchmore. They had a relationship going way back. She was an explorer, learning about the police department, and allegedly for 12 years, 10 to 12 years, they had a relationship that at some point became physical. At some point, before she reached the age of majority there for sex in Massachusetts, it's 16. So there's been denial by the defense until she reached that age. And then, yes, we did have a consensual relationship. She gets pregnant. Arguably, he doesn't want the child. Oh, by the way, he's got two already with his current wife. And on the day that Sandra Birchmore is murdered, his wife gives birth to their third child. So he's got a lot going on. Now, those are the least of his worries of
Such a
family
sad
members, because now
story.
it's outrageous. And so now he is indicted by the FBI, through the FBI's affidavit by the feds. He is indicted now
Hmm.
for her murder. So back to the original devil's advocate question. Let's assume the state police were too incompetent to solve this. Fine. Why wasn't he investigated and charged with the statutory rape? And I don't know if they mean on different levels, but the FBI charges incorporate that. It's not a separate
Hmm.
charge as I read the indictment. But what do you think? Why wouldn't the state? Again, we're talking about Canton, Stoughton area of
Hmm.
Massachusetts. What do you think?
That is a really, really good question. Look, you know that sometimes these things are politically driven, these things meaning prosecutions. And unfortunately, unlike a civil case where a person could move forward with trying to get justice in a civil court, criminal cases are all either brought or not brought by the government. And if the government does not have an appetite, or the state in this case doesn't have an appetite to pursue the case, they won't do it. Obviously, if they didn't, they're going to claim they didn't necessarily know about it until after she died. They could say that. And now, how are they going to prove the relationship without their complainant, without her testimony, without being able to put her on the stand and have her say, I was this age when this and this happened. And it's just such an injustice that happened to this woman, to this girl, with the state not doing that, and also not doing the right thing by her on the murder charge. I'm so glad that the FBI stepped in and is hopefully going to right this wrong. But this is one of the saddest cases that I think I've really ever seen. It's really horrible, and with a side of cover up, right? I mean, I think that's where we're going with this potentially. Michael, what
Well,
do you
and
think?
it feeds into the whole Canton, Stoughton,
Yeah.
Boston suburb conspiracy. Why would they pursue that case against this guy on the state level? Maybe it's because they got all kinds of things they are massaging there. Hey, I just got a note from Linda Kenny Bodden, reminding me that in Massachusetts it is 16, but if there's an
Hmm.
official involved, it jumps up to 18. So
Good job,
somebody
Linda.
in a position of
She's
authority.
not even here, and she's
I know she's
killing
not
it
even
on
here,
this
and yet
show.
she's here. So yeah. So
She's here. Hey, Linda.
the interview with the cop, the defendant, has been tailored to match the timelines.
Isn't that
But there,
amazing?
those texts. If you read, I posted the indictment last
Hmm.
week. Take a look at that thing, man. It's unbelievable. The texts that are in there. Text. I mean, I'm telling you, did the Canton Stoughton police understand the power of the text now? There are
Right,
texts in there
please.
that are so outrageous that suggest enticing one another to have sex with one another, if that's something, uh, long before she got to 16 or 18. I mean, we're
Yep.
talking 14, 15. He talks about being sorry that he didn't do it when she was 12. So
Oh my God. The
yeah,
takeaway is, please, if you're going to be committing crimes, just maybe don't confess to them on text. I
yeah,
don't even,
that's a defense attorney's talking there. For those of us who hope he gets his, that's a shame about those texts. Hey,
yeah, no, I'm good. I'm good. I'm
where
good.
can we find you? So the shameless plug portion as we wrap things up
Ah,
here. Where can we find you?
thank you. I am a criminal defense attorney. I'm at Farber Schneider Ferrari, and you can find me there. You can call me. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Instagram, Serena T. I think it's just Serena Townsend on Twitter. But if you Google me, you'll see all sorts of fun articles about me when I was working in the government. So you could find me anywhere.
All right.
Michael, I could find you anywhere, and I will.
Oh, that sounds like a threat.
No,
Okay.
no, no. Just for a
Yeah.
congratulatory high five. Nothing more.
Yes. Well, always a pleasure. Former
Thank
guest and
you.
host on Law and Crime, doing a fine job there, and and I appreciate you joining. I know that
Thanks,
Linda,
Michael.
obviously, she's watching, and she should be scared. So,
She would have been
so
on time. She would have been on time.
that's a crapshoot. Okay, now this is the most interesting part of the show. This is where I try to stop the feed. This is always very challenging for me. So let's cross our fingers, and we'll see you next time, right? On Law and Crime. I'm sorry, Justice Served, whatever.